I left my family's ranch for 3 years to take care of my dying grandmother, and when I came back, someone had turned it into a private golf course and claimed I sold it to them. Problem is, I never signed a damn thing. My name's Daniel Harper. I'm 49, fourth-generation cattle rancher out in eastern Oklahoma. And up until a few years ago, my life was about as simple as it gets: sunrise, feed the herd, fix fences, drink coffee that's way too strong, and mind my own business. My old man used to say land like ours doesn't belong to us. Not really. We just hold on to it long enough to pass it down. And when he passed in late 2019, that sentence hit different. He left me everything. All 40 acres of it. Same land my great-granddad bought with money he earned laying railroad tracks. And I'll be honest, I didn't see it as an asset. I saw it as a responsibility, something you don't mess up. A few months later, my grandmother out in Oregon took a bad turn. Dementia got worse, couldn't live alone anymore, and there wasn't anyone else who could step in. So I packed up, left the ranch under the supervision of my foreman, a guy named Luis who'd been with us for over a decade. And I told myself it'd be temporary, a few months, maybe a year. Life doesn't really ask for your schedule, though. 1 year turned into 3. I kept everything current, taxes paid on time, insurance active, paperwork clean, never missed a notice, never got a warning letter, nothing, just occasional calls with Luis where he'd say, "Place is holding steady. Dan, cows are good." And I trusted him because I had no reason not to. Taking care of my grandmother wasn't easy. Watching someone slowly forget who you are will mess with your head in ways you don't talk about. But there was something grounding about knowing I still had the ranch waiting for me, like an anchor back to who I was before everything got heavy. She passed in the summer of 2023, peacefully, in her sleep. And after the funeral, I drove back to Oklahoma with this strange mix of grief and relief, like I'd done what I was supposed to do, and now it was time to go home. That drive back, I remember it clear as day. Miles of highway, radio barely on, just me and my thoughts, thinking about getting back into routine, fixing up the south pasture fence that had been giving us trouble before I left, maybe expanding the herd again, just getting back to normal. But normal wasn't waiting for me, not even close. I turned off the county road onto what should have been my dirt driveway, and instead of tire tracks and dust, I'm staring at fresh asphalt and a gated entrance, tall black metal, keypad entry, cameras mounted like it's Fort Knox. At first I thought I'd taken a wrong turn, maybe zoned out and missed my mark, so I backed up, checked the road sign, checked the fence line, same old oak tree still leaning at the corner, same ditch running alongside the property. This was my land, no question about it. I pulled up closer to the gate, and there's this polished sign bolted into stone that reads Silver Creek Estates Golf Club, and I just sat there, engine idling, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Because beyond that gate, where my cattle used to graze, I could see manicured fairways, sand traps, flags moving in the breeze, and in the distance this massive clubhouse. Glass windows reflecting the sun like something out of a luxury resort commercial. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because my brain didn't know what else to do, like it was trying to reject reality altogether. I grabbed my phone, thinking maybe Luis would have an explanation. Maybe there'd been some temporary lease, some arrangement I wasn't aware of, but before I even called him, I noticed a number posted on the gate with a little sign that said, "For member access assistance, call." So I did. A woman picked up, calm, professional voice, the kind that sounds like she's used to being in charge. "Silver Creek Estates, this is Rebecca Lang. How can I help you?" I told her, "Yeah, I think there's been some kind of mistake. This property belongs to me." There was a pause on the line. Not confusion, more like mild annoyance. "Sir, this property was legally purchased in 2021 through Ridgeway Development Group. If you have concerns, you'll need to contact them." I felt something shift in my chest right then, that first real spark of anger cutting through the confusion. "No, ma'am. I didn't sell anything. Not in 2021, not ever." Another pause, longer this time. Then she said, a little sharper, "Well, according to our records, Daniel Harper signed the transfer himself." I tightened my grip on the phone. "Then your records are wrong." And that's the moment it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had taken my land. I didn't even hang up right away, just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Like if I stayed still long enough the whole thing might rewind itself and go back to normal, but it didn't. And eventually that woman on the other end said, "Sir?" And I snapped out of it, muttered something like, "Yeah, I'll be in touch," and ended the call. First person I dialed after that was Luis. He picked up on the third ring. Same calm voice I'd heard for years. "Dan, you made it back?" And I said, "I'm at the ranch, or what used to be the ranch. You want to tell me why there's a golf course on my land?" There was silence, not the confused kind, the heavy kind, like he'd been expecting this moment and just didn't know when it would come. "I was going to call you," he said finally. That right there didn't sit well. "You were going to call me?" I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady, but it was slipping. "Luis, start talking." He let out a breath, and then the story started coming out in pieces. Sometime in early 2021, a group of people showed up claiming they'd purchased a large portion of the South acreage, had paperwork, permits, everything looked official. County trucks came through, surveyors marked lines, and from his perspective, it all checked out. I asked him one question, real slow. "Did you ever see me sign anything?" He hesitated. "No, but they had documents. Dan, notarized, stamped. They said you were handling things remotely while taking care of your grandma." That sentence hit harder than I expected, because it meant whoever did this knew exactly where I was, knew I was gone, knew I wasn't around to dispute anything in real time. That's not random, that's targeted. I hung up with Luis without yelling, which surprised even me, because the anger hadn't fully landed yet. It was still building, still looking for somewhere to go. I drove back into town, straight to the small law office my family had used for years, a guy named Walter Briggs, pushing 70, sharp as a tack and stubborn as hell, the kind of attorney who doesn't waste words. He looked up when I walked in, gave me that half smile. "Daniel Harper, didn't expect to see you today." I said, "You're going to want to sit down for this one." And then I told him everything, the gate, the golf course, the phone call, the claim that I sold my own land without knowing it. He didn't interrupt once, just leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed together, eyes narrowed in that way that meant he was already 10 steps ahead in his head. When I finished, he stood up, walked over to a filing cabinet, pulled out the original deed my father had registered decades ago, and laid it on the desk next to a clean legal pad. "If what you're saying is accurate," he said, "then someone committed a very bold kind of fraud, and they didn't just hope you wouldn't notice, they counted on it." That sentence sat heavy. He immediately ordered a full title search, expedited, and told me not to confront anyone else directly until we had documentation. "Paper speaks louder than anger," he said, which at the time sounded like the most frustrating advice in the world, because anger was exactly what I had plenty of. 2 days later, I was back in his office, and he slid a stack of papers across the desk. "You were right. Turns out, in June of 2021, a sale agreement was filed transferring 28 acres of my land to a shell company called Ridgeway Development Group for just under $1 million, signature listed as mine, notarized, everything looking clean on the surface. But it wasn't clean, not even close. Walter pointed things out one by one, like he was dismantling a bad lie. This notary seal, fake, doesn't exist in the state registry. This signature, not even a decent forgery. Honestly, whoever did it got sloppy. And here, he tapped another page, the closing date. According to this, you were physically present in Oklahoma." I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and showed him transactions from Oregon that exact day, groceries, gas, a pharmacy charge for my grandmother's medication. Walter gave a small nod. "That's your alibi?" And just like that, confusion turned into something sharper, purpose. We weren't guessing anymore, we had proof. And once you have proof, things start moving fast. Walter filed a criminal complaint with the county district attorney that same afternoon, and because the transaction involved interstate communication and wire transfers, he looped in federal authorities too. I remember asking him, "You really think they'll take this seriously?" He looked at me like I'd just asked if the sky was blue. "Daniel, someone just forged a land transfer worth millions of dollars. They're going to take this very seriously." Meanwhile, I wasn't about to just sit around waiting. Walter told me to hold off. I didn't. Within 48 hours, I had a locksmith out at that gate. The guy looked at me like I was crazy when I told him to change the locks on a private golf course. "You sure about this?" he asked. I said, "It's my property." That was enough for him. We swapped out the access system, cut off their entry, and I personally put up no trespassing signs along the perimeter, every 100 feet like the law requires. It felt surreal, like I was reclaiming something that had been stolen in broad daylight. Didn't take long for them to notice. My phone rang that evening, unknown number. I picked up. Mr. Harper, this is Thomas Reed from Ridgeway Development. I believe there's been a misunderstanding regarding the property access. His tone was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that tries to stay calm no matter what. I leaned back in my chair, looked out over land that was supposed to be mine all along, and said, "Oh, I understand the situation perfectly. You built a golf course on stolen land." There was a pause, a real one this time. Then he said, "We purchased that land legally." I couldn't help but let out a short laugh. "Then you might want to explain that to the FBI, because they're already looking into it." That changed his tone just a little. Not panic, but the confidence cracked. "There's no need to escalate this," he said. "I'm going to give you 120 hours," I cut in, "to vacate my property. After that, it won't be a conversation anymore." He tried to respond, but I hung up before he could finish. For the first time since I drove through that gate, I felt something close to control again, like I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was pushing back. The call came in early. One of those numbers you don't recognize but somehow know you should answer, and sure enough, the voice on the other end was calm, direct, no small talk. "Just Mr. Harper, this is Special Agent Collins with the FBI. We've reviewed the materials your attorney submitted. We'd like to meet." That was it. No drama, no promises, just quiet confidence. And for the first time since all this started, I got the sense that someone else was stepping into the fight who actually knew how to finish it. We met that afternoon in a plain office about an hour out. Nothing fancy, just a desk, a couple chairs, and a man who looked like he'd seen every version of this kind of story before. He walked me through what they already had: wire transfers crossing state lines, shell companies layered just enough to look legitimate, but not enough to hold up under scrutiny. And the part that stuck with me the most, the impersonation. "They didn't just forge your signature," he said, flipping through photos. "They had someone show up at closing pretending to be you." I stared at the picture for a second, grainy security footage of a man in a button-down shirt, ball cap pulled low, signing documents with my name like it was nothing. And I remember thinking how strange it felt, seeing someone else wear your identity like a jacket, like your entire life could just be copied and pasted if the paperwork looked right. "You know him?" Collins asked. I shook my head. "Never seen him before." He nodded, like he expected that. "You weren't the target because of who you are," he added. "You were the target because you weren't here." That line stayed with me, because it was true, and there's a kind of anger that comes from realizing someone didn't beat you. They just waited until you stepped away. The investigation moved fast after that, faster than anything I'd ever seen, because once they started pulling threads, the whole thing unraveled quick. Ridgeway Development wasn't some big established firm. It was a front, built by a guy named Victor Hale, mid-40s, clean record on paper, but behind that, a pattern: small deals, quick flips, always operating just inside the line until this one. This one he pushed too far. He bought my land on paper for under $1 million, then turned around and sold it to the Homeowners Association running Silver Creek for over $3 million, pocketing the difference like it was just another Tuesday. Greed makes people sloppy, and sloppy leaves trails. They picked him up at his office 3 days later. I didn't go watch, didn't need to, but I saw the footage that night on the local news, him walking out in handcuffs, still trying to keep that composed look on his face like he could talk his way out of it if he just found the right words. Funny thing about words, they don't mean much when the evidence is already stacked against you. Not long after that, Rebecca Lang, the same woman who answered the phone that first day, reached out again. But this time the tone was different, softer, careful. "Mr. Harper, we believe we may have been misled as well," she said, and I could hear the shift, the distance from confidence to damage control. I met with her and a couple board members a few days later, sat across from them in that big glass clubhouse they built on my land, and I remember thinking how strange it was sitting there as a guest in a place that existed because someone stole from me. Rebecca leaned forward, hands folded, professional, but not cold anymore. "We acted in good faith," she said. "We paid market value, we secured permits, we've invested significantly into the property." I listened, let her finish, and then I said, real calm, "You built a business on land you didn't own, and you made money off it for 3 years." One of the board members shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, but Rebecca held eye contact. We'd like to resolve this without further litigation. That word, resolve, it sounds peaceful, but what it really means is they're hoping you'll settle for less than what you're owed just to make the problem go away. Walter handled most of the talking after that, and he didn't leave much room for interpretation. Our position is simple, he said, sliding a document across the table. You compensate Mr. Harper for unauthorized commercial use, plus damages, or we proceed to federal court where the numbers will not be in your favor. There's a moment in negotiations where both sides realize the game has changed. You could see it in their faces, that quiet calculation, weighing cost versus consequence. In the end, they agreed. Not because they wanted to, but because they didn't have a better option. Victor Hale pled guilty to wire fraud and identity theft not long after, facing up to 8 years, and from what I hear, he didn't fight it much once everything was laid out. Turns out confidence fades real quick when there's nowhere left to run. As for Silver Creek, we reached a settlement that, on paper, looks almost unreal. They pay me monthly rent now, $16,000 a month, locked in for 15 years. On top of that, they paid back over $500,000 for the 3 years they operated without permission, plus additional damages that pushed the total just north of $4 million. And here's the part one made sure of personally. One missed payment, just one, triggers immediate default, legal seizure of the property, and potential criminal contempt. No second chances, no gray area. They signed it. Every page. These days, I still drive out there sometimes, park just outside that same gate. Watch people tee off where my cattle used to graze, and I won't lie, it's a strange feeling. Part of me still sees the old land, the fences, the dust, my dad standing out there with his hat pulled low, checking the herd. That part doesn't go away. But another part of me understands something I didn't before. Land isn't just about memory, it's about control. And if you don't protect it, someone else will take it and tell you it was always theirs. They've made every payment so far, right on time. No delays, no excuses, but I read every statement, every line, every date, because trust isn't something you rebuild the same way once it's been broken like that. So yeah, that's my story. I left to take care of family. Came back to find strangers had built a business on my name. And in the end, I got it back, just not in the way I expected. Now I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have shut the whole thing down and torn it all out, or taken the deal and let it run? And more importantly, do you think people like Victor Hale are rare, or just the ones who got caught? Let me know in the comments.